Hi, my name's Vince Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about The Sea. The Sea, a novel by Iris Murdoch. I'd like to go through this book exploring the structure of the plot as well as the themes. Now, this was published in 1978 and it won the Booker Prize that year. I guess if you could sum up what this book is about, it's something along the lines of an ageing celebrity of the theatrical world tries to find some peace and tranquility by the sea in solitude, away from everybody, away from city life, but fails miserably. This ageing celebrity is this theatre director called Charles Araby. His whole career has been in the West End. It's all he knows, really. He's a completely self-absorbed, self-obsessed, you might say narcissistic person, but he's got his charms as well. We follow really through the course of the book his emotional and spiritual highs and lows as he lives by the ever-changing aspects of the sea. Now, the book is divided into three broad sections. We have a section at the beginning called prehistory, then we have history, then we have a postscript near the end of the book. And the book really is written from Charles's point of view. He's writing a set of memoirs, possibly an autobiography, possibly a diary. It's kind of a mixture of those. He's not sure either, he keeps informing us. So we're reading all this stuff which is filtered through Charles's experience already. So we're kind of reading Charles's words, if you like. And in the prehistory, we learn about Charles's move to this remote location, possibly in the north of England by the sea, away from the glittering lights of London. We hear of his desire to remove himself from the hurly-burly of celebrity life, the gossip of the West End, and to live a simpler life. We hear about how he's not well liked by the locals, and also about his eating habits, which are quite funny. We'll come on to that at the end. He also talks a lot about his life so far. He loves talking about himself. So he talks about his mum and dad, his cousin James, James's parents. He's very fond of James's mother, his aunt Estelle. He talks about Clement Machin, who is this older lady whom he has a relationship with, who really makes his career in the West End. He introduces us to Lizzie, an actress who he had a relationship with, Rosina as well, another actress, and a couple of his colleagues, such as Gilbert Opian, who we'll meet later, who is infatuated with Charles, and most importantly, perhaps, he speaks something of his first love, a girl called Hartley, whom he was completely besotted with as a teenager, and she was as well with him, but then they parted ways when he went to pursue a life in the theatre. But he's always kind of held a candle out for her. He's never married, but you know, if he ever did marry, it would be to Hartley. Incidentally, we're going to meet all these people soon in these strange coincidences. The book has this rather unreal, dreamlike quality to it. As well as meeting all these past lovers, colleagues, family, etc., Charles has a terrifying vision. He goes swimming in the sea, something he does throughout the novel, but he sees this terrifying snake stroke lizard stroke serpent stroke dragon shooting out of the water 20 feet high, I think it is, and it absolutely terrifies him and shakes him to his very soul. Indeed, this vision haunts him for the rest of the novel. And we also have some weird, possibly ghostly goings on in Shrough End, his rather plain and dour house as well. History is the main part of the novel. It takes up the bulk of the book. And it's here that Charles, despite wanting to be away from everybody seemingly comes to him. So his previous girlfriends, Rosina, who's incredibly jealous of any other female attention, Lizzie, who Charles has treated terribly in the past but keeps coming back to him, Gilbert, his friend, who is gay and is besotted with Charles. Gilbert's a brilliant character, by the way. These people come back to see Charles. He can't get rid of them. They invite themselves in, they stay. But perhaps most importantly, in a weird cosmic turn of events, Charles bumps into Hartley, his first love. She, by sheer coincidence, lives where Charles has moved by the sea, and he's completely besotted with her once again. She's now a very plain, unassuming, timid, middle-aged woman, but Charles is just completely taken with her. And he just pesters her. He's almost like a stalker, really. He just follows her around, sends her notes, letters, sets up clandestine meetings in the church. He keeps going to her bungalow, which is called Niblets, and she's married to this burly ex-soldier called Ben Fitch, and he wants nothing he just doesn't want anything to do with Charles, and Charles just thinks he's just evil personified. He just thinks that he's just spoiled Hartley's life, this Ben Fitch. And so Charles is doing everything he can to persuade Hartley to leave Ben, her husband, and run off with him. Now Charles briefly goes back to London to sort some things out, and he goes into his London flat. Whilst there, he meets up with a friend called Perry Arbelow, or a colleague at least, and they have this hilarious drunken encounter. And then the next day he's in the Wallace collection, Charles, and he bumps into his cousin James in a weird coincidence. Another one. He goes back to James's flat, and James is this rather spiritually minded, incredibly well put together person, unflappable character. He's a Buddhist, he's in the army, possibly in the Secret Service. Charles has always treated him with a degree of jealousy, and he's never quite trusted James. But James seems to always be there for Charles, at least. And James is an important figure as we go through this novel, actually. Back at Shrough End, Charles hears that Hartley, his first love, who he's now trying to win back, and her husband have an adopted child, Titus, whom has gone missing. And they're kind of beside themselves with worry about this. He's been gone quite a while. But in another crazy coincidence, Titus turns up at Charles's place. And Charles takes to this boy and kind of treats him like the son he never had. Part of him wants to use this as a way of to winning Hartley over, but part of him also is genuinely very fond of Titus. Gilbert Opian, his old friend, is back on the scene, acting as a butler now. Very kind of servile character. And Charles does something drastic. He basically invites Hartley round his house and doesn't let her go. She's basically under house arrest. Um, and Charles seems to be losing his marbles here. And poor Hartley, this woman is just terrified. She's completely stressed that her husband Ben will do something silly and, you know, act violently towards her and Charles, and it's all gone crazy. And Charles's friends are like, and Titus are like, come on Charles, you've got to let this lady go. But he won't, you know, and he's just terrifying the poor woman, you know, the opposite of what he really wants to do, which is for her to fall in love with him so they can go off together. Eventually Charles does let her go, somewhat reluctantly, but he still hasn't given up hope of winning Hartley over. Eventually Perry comes, his friend from London, a Northern Irish actor who he got drunk with in London, comes up. So there's a real kind of party atmosphere now at Shrough End, except for Charles, of course. Charles is quite miserable. He's still lovesick for Hartley, but everyone else around him seems to be having a whale of a time, getting drunk, etc. One night, however, Charles is pushed into what's called Min's Cauldron, which is this almost like a natural whirlpool near his house by the sea. He's pushed in and he almost drowns. And Charles instantly thinks it's Ben, Hartley's husband. He's convinced of the matter. But even worse than that, Titus, the adopted son of Hartley and Ben, who's staying with Charles, he drowns in the sea. So now everyone is grieving as well. That's because everyone's taken a liking to Titus and it's just really shocked everybody. Charles himself is devastated, and so is James. James, his cousin, who's grown very fond of Titus. In a somewhat shock turn of events, it turns out that Perry Arbelow, the actor who's had a long working relationship with Charles, he is the person who's pushed him in, who wanted to kill him, an attempted murder. It turns out that Perry absolutely hates Charles. He's hated him for years because he had an affair with his wife and took his wife away from him. But Perry had nothing to do with Titus's death. That seems to have just been a terrible accident. Charles goes back to Niblets, which is the bungalow where Hartley and her husband Ben live. It turns out that they're planning to emigrate to Australia. And indeed they do emigrate. Without telling Charles. Charles is in absolute despair at this point. His whole life seems to have crumbled. He's invested everything in this love for Hartley. His whole heart, his whole life, his whole soul, in a completely obsessive way. And now she's just gone. And he struggles to come to terms with that. And by this point he'd fallen out with his cousin James, who'd sent him back to London. And he now finds out through a letter that his cousin James has died. The postscript is just a few chapters at the end of the book where, after seeing these lovely seals in the sea, he goes back to London and he's inherited James's stuff, his flat, so he's sorting everything out. But he continues to process, or try to come to terms with this frustrated love for Hartley. And that's really how the book ends. So what are we to make of The Sea, the Sea? Well, it's an amazing book, really. I mean, it's just so beautifully written. There's this Shakespearean comedic glow over the whole thing, where strange quasi-supernatural occurrences happen, unlikely coincidences, weird turns of events take place. Very much has that uncanny feel to it. This rather rosy, sunlit atmosphere to the book. It's rather intoxicating. And it's such a joy to follow Charles in this book through his frustrations, his moments of joy, his moments of elation, his crashes back to earth again. Despite his pretensions and his pomposity, he is a really engaging character. You do really get to know him very well, and he's very funny as well. He's very eccentric. I mean, he thinks he's some expert on food, and he puts together these really terrible sounding meals which he insists are the right way to eat, and it's very funny reading him describe his meals actually. The other characters are a joy as well. I mean, Gilbert Opian is just so funny, the way he's continually kind of put down by Charles, but he's like a puppy. He just never leaves Charles. He's, you know, always trying to get his approval. It's a very funny lines between Charles and Gilbert. And Perry Arbelow, I mean, the passage where Charles visits him in London and Perry kind of sounds off about Ireland, and because he's from Northern Ireland, of course Iris Murdoch was Irish, but the way he just talks about Ireland in such a funny way, and the way he hates his wife, and he kind of throws a glass at the fireplace, you know, in this kind of this fit of rage, which of course doesn't break, so it's a complete letdown, you know, moment of bathos. It's just so funny. That whole chapter is just absolutely hilarious. I mean, laugh out loud funny. It's just such like an awkwardness and a likeable stupidity to many of the characters in this book. They're all heavy drinkers as well, or most of them are. But there's a spiritual undertow to this book as well. It seems that Charles, in retreating to the seaside, is making all the shows of being a hermit, being some kind of ascetic character, living this monk-like existence. But really, he's still completely wrapped up in himself. It's all about him. And perhaps that monster he sees really represents the kind of, I don't know, the darkness in his heart, you know, the kind of self-absorption of himself. Nothing Charles really does is for anyone else. It's by and large, I mean, he's a decent person, I guess, you know, but all he thinks about is himself. So perhaps that monster represents his own self-obsession, his own turning in on himself, that definition of sin, of course, by St. Augustine. But it's actually James, his cousin, who seems to be the one guiding Charles through the book. And James tries to be, in his Buddhist ways, trying to encourage Charles to let go of this childhood love. You know, it's gone. It could never possibly work. He's terrifying the poor woman. You know, it's causing Charles himself a great deal of anguish and pain. He's continually encouraging him to let go, let go, let go, which Charles, of course, can't do. But interestingly, throughout the book, people are saying to Charles, have you seen the seals, particularly the people in the pub who loathe him. Have you seen the seals? And Charles says, oh, I haven't seen the seals. And the seals are like these, it's like this destination no one's reached. No one's seen these seals. But interestingly, at the end of the book, near the end of the book, at the end of the history section, Charles finally has this spiritual joy when he sees the seals come up to him in the sea in the dawn after he spent the night sleeping on the beach. And by that time Hartley had gone, his love had gone to Australia, so there's very much this sense of spirituality and joy flooding Charles at an unexpected time after his love had left him. And I guess that represents Charles. I guess that's the antithesis of this huge monster coming out of the sea. These seals, these elusive seals, giving Charles a sense of enlightenment, I suppose. But what I do like about the book is it doesn't stop there. And Charles acknowledges that in his writing. He says, you know, I could have ended it there, but of course life goes on and he still carries on making the mistakes, etc. So it's a very lovely way of ending the book. You know, it's not kind of sewn up in that perfect way. It's not that preachy or dogmatic. So the sea is an absolutely wonderful book, so rich. I mean, check out my slideshow. I've included some themes I've picked up in there, which perhaps I haven't mentioned in this video, but my goodness me, it's a beautifully written and engaging, touching, humorous and very spiritual book, which I think really resonates at a very deep level. And it is a real joy to read. If you haven't read it, I do recommend The Sea by Murdoch. Thanks for watching, and please check out this brief slideshow with the structure and themes afterwards. Bye.